In the underworld of New York, silence is usually a weapon. But for Don Lucien Moretti, the most feared man on the East Coast, silence was a curse. His only son, the heir to a billion-dollar empire, was born into a world without sound. For 4 years, doctors said it was hopeless. Rivals laughed behind their hands. The boy was broken. But they were all wrong. The truth wasn't in the medical charts. It was hiding in the nursery. And the only person who knew the dark secret was the one person nobody looked at the maid. What she pulled out of her apron pocket didn't just cure a boy. It brought the entire Moretti empire to its knees. This is the story of the silent heir. The rain battered against the reinforced glass of the penthouse in Tribeca, but inside the air was still. It was the kind of stillness that suffocates. Lucien the Saint Moretti stood over the crib. He was a man who could order a hit on a chaotic rival in Chicago without his pulse rising above 60. He wore bespoke suits cut from Italian silk and carried himself with the weight of a king. But looking down at the newborn, his shoulders slumped. He didn't startle. Lucien said, his voice a low rumble. The door slammed. The thunder. He didn't blink. Isabella. Isabella Moretti sat in the velvet armchair nearby, nursing a glass of vintage Pinot Noir. She was breathtakingly beautiful, a former pageant queen from Sicily, with eyes like ice and a heart to match. She swirled the wine, looking bored. The doctors said it takes time, Renzo. Don't be dramatic. But Lucien wasn't being dramatic. He was being practical. In the Moretti family, weakness was a death sentence. A deaf Don. It was impossible. You needed to hear the whisper of betrayal before it became a shout. 6 months later, the diagnosis was official. Dr. Aris Thorne, a specialist from Mount Sinai, who had been paid 3 times his salary to make a house call, wiped his glasses nervously. It is profound sensorineural hearing loss, Mr. Moretti, the doctor stammered, avoiding the Don's gaze. The auditory nerve is unresponsive. Little Leo. He lives in total silence. Lucien looked at his son. The boy Leo was perfect in every other way. He had the Moretti dark curls and olive skin. But he sat on the exam table staring blankly at the wall, unresponsive to the devastating news being delivered about his life. Fix it, Lucien commanded. I can't. It's genetic or perhaps a developmental anomaly. Hearing aids won't work. Implants might, but the nerve damage looks extensive. Isabella sighed, standing up and smoothing her dress. Well, that's that then. We tried. Perhaps we can send him to that facility in Zurich, the one for special cases. Lucien whipped his head around his eyes, flashing with a violence that made the doctor flinch. He is my blood, Isabella. He stays. But as the years ticked by, the resolve in Lucien's heart began to rot. Leo grew into a toddler, then a 4-year-old. He was silent, isolated, and disconnected. He didn't speak. He only made guttural noises. When Lucien tried to teach him to show him the business, or even just play catch, the barrier of silence was a wall he couldn't punch through. The other families began to circle. The Russos, a rival clan operating out of New Jersey, had already started making jokes about the mute Moretti. Lucien felt his power slipping. He began to look at his son, not with love, but with resentment. And in the shadows of the mansion, watching it all, was Clara. Clara Vance was 24, with tired eyes and rough hands. She was the maid hired specifically to handle the difficult tasks regarding Leo that Isabella refused to do. Clara changed him, fed him, and held him when he cried tears that made no sound. Clara was invisible to people like Lucien and Isabella. She was furniture, but furniture sees everything. Clara noticed things that the high-priced doctors missed. She noticed that Leo didn't respond to loud noises, yes. If you clapped behind his head, nothing. But one afternoon, while cleaning the nursery, she dropped a heavy silver serving tray. It hit the floor with a massive clang. Leo didn't turn around, but his hand, which was resting on the wooden floorboards, twitched. He felt the vibration, she thought. That was normal for the deaf. But then a week later, something stranger happened. Clara was humming, a low, melancholic lullaby her grandmother used to sing in the hills of Colombia. She wasn't loud. She was rocking Leo to sleep. As she hit a specific low note, a deep hum in her chest, Leo's eyes snapped open. He looked directly at her lips. It wasn't a look of confusion. It was a look of recognition. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. She stopped humming. Leo reached up his tiny hand, grasping her throat, waiting for the vibration to return. He isn't broken. Clara realized a chill running down her spine. He's blocked. She began to pay closer attention to Isabella. The lady of the house was rarely affectionate, but she was obsessive about Leo's medicine. Every night, Isabella insisted on administering the vitamin drops herself. For his bones, she claimed. One evening, deep in the winter of 2019, Clara was polishing the silverware in the dining room adjacent to the main hall. The heavy oak doors were slightly ajar. She heard Lucien and Isabella arguing. "He's for Isabella 4. Lucien's voice was ragged, probably from whiskey. "He can't run this family. He can't even order a coffee. The Russos are moving on the docks next week. I need an heir who can lead, not a liability." "I told you years ago." Isabella's voice was sharp, cutting. "He is a lost cause. Send him away, Lucien. Get a mistress. Have another son. I won't stop you. Just get that broken thing out of my house." "He leaves tomorrow," Lucien said, his voice breaking. "I've made the arrangements with the Institute in Switzerland. The jet leaves at 8:00 a.m. Clara dropped a spoon. It clattered onto the table. She froze. Switzerland. That was a dumping ground for the unwanted children of the elite. Leo would be drugged, sedated, and forgotten until he died. Clara looked at the grand staircase. She thought of Leo's small hand on her throat, feeling for the song. She was a maid. She had zero power. She had no money. If she spoke up, she could be killed. Lucien Moretti buried people in the foundations of skyscrapers for looking at him wrong. But she couldn't let the boy go. She needed proof, and she had one night to get it. The clock struck 2:00 a.m. The Moretti penthouse was a tomb of marble and shadows. Outside, the wind howled through the canyons of Manhattan. Clara crept down the hallway. She wore her nightgown, her feet bare, so she wouldn't make a sound on the hardwood. Her destination was the master suite, specifically Isabella's private vanity room. She knew Isabella kept the vitamins in a locked velvet box, but Clara also knew that Isabella was careless when she drank, and tonight, celebrating the decision to exile her son Isabella, had finished 2 bottles of wine. Clara pushed the door open. The room smelled of expensive perfume and stale alcohol. Her heart was beating so hard, she felt dizzy. If Lucien woke up, if the guards saw her, she moved to the vanity. The drawer was slightly open. Inside, amidst diamond necklaces and pearls, was the small blue vial. Clara grabbed it. She held it up to the moonlight. The label was peeled off, but there was a faint chemical smell, acrid metallic. This wasn't a vitamin. She wrapped it in a tissue and shoved it into her pocket. But that wasn't enough. A vial proved nothing. They would say she planted it. She needed something undeniable. She remembered the baby monitor. Isabella had a habit of talking on the phone in the nursery when she thought Leo was asleep or too deaf to understand. Clara had bought a cheap voice-activated recorder weeks ago, hiding it inside Leo's stuffed bear, Mr. Paws. She had been too afraid to check it, terrified of what she might hear. She ran to the nursery. Leo was asleep, his breathing soft. She grabbed the bear, ripped the seam open, and pulled out the small black device. She plugged her earbuds in and pressed play. Static. Then footsteps. Then Isabella's voice. Yes, he's leaving tomorrow. Finally. No, the dose is perfect. It paralyzes the auditory nerve temporarily, but if you keep it up, the atrophy mimics permanent damage. Dr. Thorne is an idiot. He sees what I pay him to see. Lucien has no idea. The boy isn't his Marco. If he ever heard Leo speak, he'd know. He has your voice. Clara gasped, clapping a hand over her mouth. The room spun. It wasn't just poison. It was treason. The boy wasn't Lucien's son. He was the son of Marco Lucien's brother, who had died in a car accident 3 years ago. A brother Lucien had hated. And Isabella had been poisoning the child to keep him deaf, to keep him from speaking, because perhaps the boy had started to talk early, and his voice sounded too much like the dead uncle. Or perhaps she just needed him broken so she could control the empire through a puppet. The door to the nursery creaked open. Clara spun around. It wasn't a guard. It was Lucien. He stood in the doorway wearing a silk robe, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He looked like a ghost. He had come to say goodbye to his son one last time before sending him away. He saw Clara standing over the crib, clutching the teddy bear and a vial. Clara. His voice was dangerous, low. What are you doing to my son? Clara trembled. This was it. She could die right now. She saw the bulge of a gun in the pocket of his robe. He never went anywhere unarmed. Mr. Moretti, she whispered, get away from him. Lucien stepped into the room, his eyes adjusting to the dark. You're stealing from a child. No, sir. Get out, Lucien snarled, before I throw you off the balcony. You are sending him away tomorrow, Clara said, her voice shaking but gaining strength. Because you think he is broken. That is none of your business. Go. Pack your bags. You're fired. He isn't deaf, sir. Lucien froze. The silence in the room was heavier than lead. He laughed, a dry, humorless sound. I have reports from the best doctors in the world. Do not insult me with fairy tales. The doctors were paid, or they were fooled. Clara took a step forward. The fear was evaporating, replaced by a fierce protectiveness. And he isn't broken. He is drugged. Lucien's face darkened. He reached for his gun. You are insane. I should shoot you where you stand for spewing lies. Look at this, Clara cried out. She didn't pull out the gun. She didn't pull out a knife. From the pocket of her apron, she pulled out a silver tuning fork. Lucien paused, confused. A tuning fork. Watch, Clara said. She walked over to the sleeping boy. She didn't strike the fork. Instead, she took the blue vial she had stolen from Isabella's room. She dipped the end of the tuning fork into the liquid. This is what your wife gives him every night. It's heavy lead acetate mixed with a nerve blocker. It doesn't just stop hearing. It creates a sensitivity to specific frequencies. It makes sound hurt. Lucien watched his hand hovering over his weapon. "What are you doing?" Clara struck the tuning fork against the side of the crib. It rang out with a pure, high-pitched A note. The reaction was instantaneous and violent. Leo didn't just wake up. He screamed. He clapped his hands over his ears, curling into a ball, sobbing in agony. "Make it stop! Make it stop!" the boy shrieked. Lucien dropped his whiskey glass. It shattered, shards flying everywhere. He wasn't looking at the glass. He was staring at his son. His son who had just spoken clear, perfect English. His son who was writhing in pain from a sound he wasn't supposed to be able to hear. Clara silenced the fork with her hand. Leo's crying subsided to a whimper. "He can hear, sir." But she has made his ears so sensitive that sound is torture. She keeps him sedated so he doesn't scream. She hid his voice. Lucien fell to his knees beside the crib. He reached out a trembling hand to touch Leo's hair. "Leo," he whispered. Leo flinched away, terrified. Lucien looked up at Clara, his eyes burning with a mixture of hope and apocalyptic rage. "Why?" he asked. "Why would she do this?" Clara reached into the teddy bear and pulled out the small black recorder. "Because," Clara said, holding the device out to the Mafia Don, "she needed to make sure you never heard the truth about whose son he really is." She pressed play. Isabella's voice filled the room, confessing her affair with Marco Lucien's dead brother. Lucien Moretti listened. The man known as the Saint disappeared. In his place, a demon began to rise. His face went completely slack, devoid of humanity. He stood up slowly. He took the recorder from Clara. He took the vial. "Lock the door," Lucien said. His voice was no longer a rumble. It was the hiss of a blade being drawn from a sheath. "Stay with the boy. Cover his ears." "Where are you going, sir?" Clara asked, though she already knew. Lucien turned to the door, his silhouette framed by the hallway light. "I'm going to have a conversation with my wife." The hallway leading to the master suite was 60 feet long, lined with portraits of Moretti ancestors who had killed to build this empire. Lucien walked past them, his footsteps silent on the Persian runner. The rage inside him wasn't a fire. It was a black hole, cold and consuming. He reached the double mahogany doors. He didn't kick them open. He didn't shout. He turned the brass handle with the gentle precision of a surgeon and slipped inside. Isabella was seated at her vanity, the very place Clara had raided just minutes before. She was removing her diamond earrings, watching her own reflection with a detached sort of admiration. The room smelled of lavender and something sharper, the metallic tang of the cleaning solution she used to wipe her jewelry. "You're up late, Renzo," she said, not turning around. She watched him through the mirror. "Did you say your goodbyes to the defective one?" The jet pilot texted. "He's ready for the morning." Lucien closed the door behind him. The lock clicked. The sound was small, but in the cavernous silence of the room, it sounded like a gunshot. Isabella paused, her hand hovering over a pearl necklace. She saw something in his reflection, a stillness that terrified her. "Why is the door locked?" she asked, her voice losing its bored lilt. Lucien walked to the center of the room. He held up the small blue vial. Isabella's eyes widened just a fraction. An amateur would have missed it. But Lucien Moretti made his living reading the micro-expressions of liars before he executed them. "I found this," Lucien said softly, "in the nursery." "Clara!" Isabella spat the name out like a curse. She spun around on her stool, her silk robe flaring. "That little rat! She's been stealing from me. I told you she was no good. That's my sedative, Lucienne. I take it for migraines. She must have dropped it in there. And this, Lucienne held up the teddy bear, its stomach ripped open, the black recorder dangling from its innards. Isabella went still. True fear began to creep into her posture. She stood up, smoothing her robe, trying to regain the height advantage. I don't know what that is. You're being paranoid. You've been drinking. Lucienne walked to the high-end sound system Isabella used to play opera while she dressed. He plugged the small recorder into the auxiliary port. Let's listen to an aria, Isabella. He pressed play. Her voice, amplified by $10,000 speakers, filled the room. The confession was inescapable. The details of the poison, the mockery of Lucienne's intelligence, and then the crushing blow, the admission about Marco. The boy isn't his Marco. If he ever heard Leo speak, he'd know. He has your voice. Isabella stood frozen, her face drained of color, leaving her looking like a marble statue. When the recording ended, the silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. Lucien looked at her. He felt a phantom pain in his chest. Not heartbreak, he and Isabella had been a business arrangement, a union of two powerful Sicilian families. The pain was pride. It was the humiliation of raising his brother's son. Marco, the brother who had tried to usurp him, the brother who had sold secrets to the feds. The brother Lucien had personally eliminated 3 years ago. Marco, Lucien whispered. The name tasted like ash. Isabella let out a shaky breath. She realized there was no way out. The cornered animal instinct took over. She didn't beg. She sneered. He was twice the man you are, she said, her voice trembling but venomous. Marco had fire. You are a calculator in a suit. You're boring, Lucien. You're cold. So you slept with my brother, Lucien said, taking a step closer. And when he died, you realized the boy looked too much like him. So you broke him. You tortured an innocent child to hide your sin. I did what I had to do, Isabella screamed, backing up until she hit the vanity table. Perfume bottles rattled. If you knew he was Marco's, you would have killed him. I saved his life. You didn't save him, Lucien said. You erased him. You made him a ghost in his own home. And what now? Isabella challenged, her eyes darting to the phone on the bedside table. You kill me, the daughter of the Gambino family. My father will burn New York to the ground if I stop breathing. Lucien stopped 3 feet from her. He looked at her throat. He could crush it in seconds. The urge was overwhelming. But Lucien was a strategist. A dead hostage was useless. You think your father will protect you when he hears this tape? Lucien asked. When he hears you betrayed a sacred marriage pact, when he hears you poisoned a child of our blood, the old world Italians. They don't look kindly on mothers who harm their sons. Isabella flinched. She knew he was right. Her father adhered to the old code. But I'm not going to kill you, Lucien said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He typed a quick message to his head of security, a man named Dante. Lockdown, level 5. No one in or out. I'm going to keep you here. Lucien said, his voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. In this room. I'm going to board up the windows. I'm going to cut the phone lines. And every day, I'm going to play this recording over the speakers, over and over again. You can't. And for dinner, Lucien interrupted, placing the blue vial on the vanity table. You will take your vitamins, the same dose you gave the boy. Let's see how much sound hurts you after a month. He turned to leave. Lucien, she shrieked, lunging for him. He backhanded her. It was a single, precise motion. She flew backward, crashing into the vanity mirror. The glass shattered spiderwebbing around her reflection. She slumped to the floor, blood trickling from her lip. "You're a fool," she hissed, spitting blood. "You think you've won? You think the Russos don't know Marco was working with them before he died? They know about the boy. They know he's the key to the trust fund your father set up. Why do you think I wanted him sent to Switzerland to hide him from them?" Lucien paused at the door. "The Russos. They're coming, Lucien." Isabella laughed, a manic, broken sound. "I told them the jet leaves at 8 Hazura a.m. They planned to hijack the car. But if the car doesn't leave, they'll come here. Tonight." Lucien looked at the grandfather clock. It was 2:25 a.m. He didn't say another word. He stepped out, locked the door from the outside, and snapped the key off in the lock. He had to get to the nursery. The nursery was bathed in the soft glow of a nightlight shaped like a moon. The storm outside had intensified, thunder rumbling like artillery fire in the distance. Clara sat on the floor, her back against the crib. She had the tuning fork in her lap, clutching it like a weapon. Her hands were shaking, but her eyes were fixed on the door. When the handle turned, she flinched, raising the fork. It was Lucien. He looked different. The pristine suit was rumpled. His knuckles were bruised, but it was his eyes that had changed. The icy detachment was gone, replaced by a chaotic storm of betrayal, fear, and a strange, desperate curiosity. He closed the door and locked it. He dragged a heavy oak dresser in front of it. "Sir," Clara whispered, standing up. "Isabella is handled," Lucien said. He didn't look at her. He looked at the boy curled up in the crib. "She said the Russos are coming. We have to move." Clara gasped. "The Russos here. She sold us out, or Marco did. It doesn't matter." Lucien walked to the crib. Leo was awake. He was staring at Lucien with wide, terrified eyes. The boy pressed his back against the bars, pulling his knees to his chest. He expected the man to look through him, to ignore him, or to look at him with disappointment. Lucien reached out a hand. Leo flinched violently, covering his ears. "Don't," Clara said, stepping forward. She was speaking to the Don of New York, like he was a child, but she didn't care. "He associates you with the loud noises, the shouting, the slamming doors. To him, you are a source of pain." Lucien pulled his hand back as if burned. "He can hear me now." "Yes," Clara said, "but everything is too loud. His brain hasn't learned to filter background noise. The thunder probably sounds like a bomb. Your voice, it's deep. It vibrates in his chest." Lucien looked at his son. He looked for Marco in the boy's face. He saw the chin, the shape of the nose. It was undeniable. This was the son of the man who had tried to kill him. This was the blood of a traitor. But then Leo whimpered, a soft, pathetic sound. "Please don't hurt me." Lucien felt something fracture in his chest. He remembered holding Leo when he was 1 day old. He remembered the promise he made to his father on his deathbed. Protect the family. Family wasn't just blood. It was the ones you stood in front of when the bullets started flying. "Clara," Lucien said, his voice rough. "Pack a bag. Essentials only. No electronics. They can track phones." "Where are we going?" "The safe house in the Catskills. It's off the grid." Clara scrambled to the changing table, shoving diapers, clothes, and warm sweaters into a duffel bag. Lucien knelt by the crib. He needed the boy to trust him. They had to move fast, and if Leo screamed, it would alert the guards, some of whom might be on Isabella's payroll. "Leo," Lucien whispered. He tried to make his voice as soft as Clara's. Leo looked at him, tears brimming in his dark eyes. Lucien didn't know sign language. He didn't know how to communicate with the son he had ignored for 4 years. He felt a wave of shame so potent it nearly brought him to his knees. He looked at Clara. "How do I tell him he's safe?" Clara paused in her packing. She looked at the tuning fork on the floor. "Don't tell him," she said. "Show him. Vibration is his language." Lucien picked up the silver tuning fork. He held it up so Leo could see it. The boy's eyes tracked the silver metal. He braced himself for the pain. But Lucien didn't strike it hard. He tapped it ever so deeply against the mattress. A low, soft hum. He placed the handle against the wooden railing of the crib near Leo's hand. Leo felt the wood buzz. It wasn't the sharp, piercing scream of the high note Clara had used to prove the point. It was a low, steady thrum, a grounding frequency. Lucien put his own hand on the rail right next to Leo's. He let the vibration connect them. "I feel it too," he was saying. "I am here." Leo looked at Lucien's hand. Then he looked at Lucien's face. The fear didn't vanish, but the panic receded. The boy slowly uncurled his legs. He reached out a hesitant finger and touched Lucien's thumb. Lucien closed his eyes. The touch was electric. "I've got you," Lucien whispered, though he knew Leo couldn't understand the words, only the intent. "I've got you." Boom. A massive explosion rocked the building. The glass of the nursery window rattled violently. The power cut out instantly, plunging the room into darkness. "They're here," Lucien said, his voice shifting instantly from father to killer. Emergency lights flickered on in the hallway, casting eerie red shadows under the door gap. Gunfire erupted downstairs, the distinct chug-chug-chug of suppressed automatic weapons. "The elevator is a death trap," Lucien said, standing up and pulling a Sig Sauer P226 from his waistband. He racked the slide. "We have to use the service stairs." "Sir, he can't walk fast enough," Clara said, clutching the bag. "I'll carry him." Lucien scooped Leo up. The boy started to cry at the sudden movement and the deafening noise of the alarms blaring through the penthouse. "His ears!" Clara shouted over the siren. "The alarm is killing him." Leo was screaming now, a sound of pure agony clawing at his ears. The decibel level of the fire alarm was torture for a normal person. For Leo, with his chemically stripped nerve endings, it must have felt like ice picks in his brain. Lucien looked around frantically. He saw a pair of noise-cancelling headphones hanging on a hook, the ones the landscapers used when blowing leaves on the terrace. He grabbed them and jammed them over Leo's ears. The boy's screaming stopped instantly. He went limp in Lucien's arms, sobbing quietly into his father's silk shirt. "Stay behind me," Lucien commanded Clara. "If I shoot you, drop to the floor. Do not hesitate. Do not look away. If I go down, you take the gun, and you shoot anything that isn't me. Do you understand?" Clara nodded, her face pale, but her jaw set. She was a maid who scrubbed floors and changed diapers. But tonight, she was a soldier. Lucien kicked the dresser away from the door. He opened it a crack. The hallway was filled with smoke. He could hear boots thudding on the marble floor. "Clear," he whispered. They moved into the corridor. The red emergency lights turned the opulent penthouse into a descent into hell. They reached the stairwell door. Lucien put his hand on the knob. He paused. He looked back at Clara. "You saved him." Lucien set his eyes hard. "Now I save you." He threw the door open. 3 men in tactical gear were coming up the stairs. They looked up surprised. Lucien didn't blink. Bang! 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 3 shots. 3 bodies tumbled backward down the concrete steps. "Move!" Lucien roared. They began to run down the 40 flights of stairs, carrying the secret that would saw the underworld apart. The stairwell was a concrete throat, swallowing them whole. The air was cold, smelling of damp cement, and the sharp copper scent of blood from the men Lucien had left on the landing above. They were on the 20th floor. 20 more to go. Lucien moved with a terrifying rhythm. Step scan, descend. Step scan, descend. He carried Leo against his left shoulder, his gun held low in his right hand. The boy was heavy, a dead weight of exhaustion and shock, the noise-cancelling headphones making him look like a tiny astronaut lost in space. Clara ran behind them, her breath hitching in her chest. She gripped the strap of the duffel bag so hard her knuckles were white. She stared at Lucien's back, the way the muscles tensed under the ruined silk suit, the way he shielded the boy's head every time they turned a corner. It was a contradiction she couldn't reconcile the killer who had just executed 3 men without blinking, and the father cradling a child with the tenderness of a saint. "My legs," Clara gasped at the 10th floor. "I can't." Lucien stopped. He didn't snap at her. He didn't tell her to hurry up. He turned his face smeared with soot and sweat and looked her in the eye. "You can," he said. It wasn't a pep talk. It was a statement of fact. "You are the only mother he has ever known. If you stop, he dies. Do you understand?" The word mother hit her harder than a bullet. It gave her a surge of adrenaline that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with duty. She nodded. "I'm ready." They burst out of the stairwell into the underground garage. It was a cavernous space, dimly lit by flickering fluorescent tubes. The shadows stretched long and distorted between the rows of luxury cars, Ferraris, Bentleys, Porsches. "The SUV," Lucien whispered, pointing to a black Mercedes G-Wagon parked in the corner. "It's armored. Bulletproof glass. Run." They sprinted across the polished concrete. They were 20 feet away when the shadows moved. From behind a concrete pillar, a figure stepped out. It was Dante Lucien's head of security, the man Lucien trusted with his life. Dante held a submachine gun leveled at Lucien's chest. "I'm sorry, boss," Dante said, his voice echoing in the vast garage. "The Russos, they offered me 5 million. And my family. They have my family." Lucien didn't stop moving. He didn't plead. He kept walking toward the car, shielding Leo with his entire body. "Put the gun down, Dante," Lucien said calmly. "You know I don't miss. I can't let you leave." "I'm holding my son," Lucien said. His voice dropped an octave. "Look at him, Dante. You held him at his christening. You want to bury a child." Dante's eyes flickered to the boy. For a split second, he hesitated. The muzzle of the gun dipped an inch. That inch was all Lucien needed. He didn't shoot Dante. He couldn't risk the recoil disturbing Leo or a stray bullet ricocheting. Instead, Lucien raised his gun and fired a single shot into the fire suppression pipe running along the ceiling directly above Dante's head. Ping! The pipe burst. A high-pressure jet of chemical foam and water blasted downward, hitting Dante with the force of a fire hose. Dante stumbled back, blinded his gun firing wildly into the ceiling. "Get in the car!" Lucien roared. He shoved Clara into the back seat and threw Leo into her arms. He dove into the driver's seat, keyed the ignition, and the V8 engine roared to life, a beast waking up. Dante had recovered. He was wiping the foam from his eyes, raising his weapon again. Other men were pouring out of the elevators, now firing at the car. Thwack, thwack, thwack. Bullets slammed into the windows. Spiderwebs of white cracks bloomed on the glass, but the reinforced polycarbonate held. Inside it sounded like hail on a tin roof. Leo woke up. He couldn't hear the gunshots because of the headphones, but he saw the cracks appearing in the window next to his face. He saw the flashes of muzzle fire. He opened his mouth to scream, but no sound came out, just a silent, gaping terror. Clara grabbed him, pulling his head down into her lap, covering him with her body. It's okay, shh, she prayed, rocking him. Lucien shifted into gear and slammed on the gas. The G-Wagon surged forward. He didn't aim for the exit ramp. He aimed for the blockade the Russo soldiers were setting up at the gate. 2 black sedans blocked the path. Hold on, Lucien shouted. He didn't brake. He accelerated. The armored SUV smashed into the side of the sedan with a sickening crunch of metal. The force knocked the lighter car aside like a toy. Airbags deployed in the sedan. The G-Wagon shuddered. The heavy steel bumper crumpled, but the engine kept roaring. They burst out of the garage and onto the rainy streets of Tribeca. Lucien drove like a man possessed. He ran red lights, swerving through the late-night traffic, heading north toward the West Side Highway. He checked the rearview mirror every 3 seconds. Are we being followed? Clara asked, her voice trembling. She was stroking Leo's hair, her hands shaking uncontrollably. Not yet, Lucien said. His eyes were scanning the road, looking for traps. But they have eyes everywhere. We need to get out of the city before they close the bridges. The car grew quiet as they hit the highway. The rain lashed against the windshield, blurring the lights of the New York skyline into streaks of gold and blood red. Lucien looked in the rearview mirror, not at the road, but at the back seat. Leo was sitting up now. He had taken the headphones off. He was pressing his small hand against the window, feeling the vibration of the car's engine, the hum of the tires on the asphalt. He looked at the city passing by, a world he had been locked away from. Then Leo looked at Lucien's reflection in the mirror. For the first time in 4 years, the look wasn't fear. It was curiosity. Lucien caught his son's eye. He wanted to say something to apologize for the years of neglect, for the fact that he was the reason men were shooting at them. But he knew Leo wouldn't understand the words. So Lucien did the only thing he could. He tapped his fingers on the steering wheel in a steady, rhythmic beat. Tap, 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 tap. Leo watched. Slowly, hesitantly, the boy mimicked the rhythm on his own knee. Tap, 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 tap. A communication, a frequency shared only by them. Lucien turned his eyes back to the road, blinking away a burning sensation in his eyes. For a man who dealt in death, he had never felt so terrified of losing a life. The safe house was a hunting cabin, deep in the Catskill Mountains, buried at the end of a 3-mile dirt road that wasn't on any GPS. It was a relic of the Prohibition era, built by Lucien's grandfather, to store bootlegged whiskey. They arrived just as dawn was breaking, a grey, bruised light filtering through the dense pine trees. The rain had turned to a wet, heavy mist. Lucien killed the engine. The silence of the woods was absolute. No sirens, no city hum, just the wind in the trees. "We're here," Lucien said. He sounded exhausted. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind the bruising ache of reality. Clara unbuckled her seatbelt. Leo was asleep in her lap, his breathing hitchy and uneven. "He's burning up," Clara whispered, touching his forehead. "Lucien, he's so hot," Lucien got out and opened the back door. He lifted Leo out. The boy was limp, his skin flushed a sickly red sweat, matting his dark curls to his forehead. "It's the withdrawal," Lucien said grimly, carrying him toward the cabin. "Isabella's poison. His body is craving the sedative." They entered the cabin. It was cold, smelling of cedar and dust. Lucien laid Leo on the oversized leather couch and immediately went to the fireplace. He moved with mechanical efficiency, chopping kindling, striking a match, getting a fire roaring to chase away the damp chill. But the heat didn't help Leo. Within an hour, the boy woke up screaming. It wasn't a scream of fear this time. It was physical pain. He arched his back, clawing at his ears, his skin, his stomach. He threw up bile onto the rug. His eyes were rolled back, unfocused. "Make it stop!" Leo shrieked, his voice raspy. "My ears!" "It hurts, it hurts." Clara sat on the floor with him, pulling him into her lap, indifferent to the vomit. She rocked him, humming that low, vibrating lullaby against his temple. "I know, baby, I know. It's leaving your body. You have to fight it." Lucien stood by the window watching. He felt utterly powerless. He was a man who could fix problems with money or violence. He could negotiate treaties between warring crime families. But he couldn't negotiate with biology. He couldn't shoot a fever. He paced the room, his hands clenched into fists. "Is there anything we can give him? Aspirin? Whiskey?" "No," Clara said sharply, not looking up. "His liver is probably compromised from years of that chemical. We have to let him sweat it out. We just need water and cold compresses." For the next 12 hours, the cabin became a torture chamber. Leo hallucinated. He cried out for his mother, the woman who had poisoned him. He cried out for shadows that weren't there. Lucien spent the time securing the perimeter. He checked the window's loaded spare magazines for his gun and set up tripwires in the woods using fishing line and bells he found in a tackle box. It was busy work. It was the only way to keep himself from going insane, listening to his son's agony. By nightfall, the worst of the screaming had stopped. Leo had collapsed into a fitful, whimpering sleep. Clara was slumped against the couch, exhausted, her apron stained and wrinkled. Her hair had escaped her bun, framing her face in wild strands. Lucien walked over to her. He held out a glass of water. "Drink," he said. Clara took it, her hands shaking. She drained the glass in one gulp. "He's stabilizing," she whispered. "His pulse is slower. The fever is breaking." Lucien sat down on the heavy wooden coffee table facing her. The firelight cast deep shadows on his face, making him look older, more jagged. "You knew," Lucien said softly. "About the humming, about the vibration. How long?" Clara looked at Leo. 6 months, maybe more. I suspected, but I was afraid to hope. You should have told me." "Told you?" Clara let out a short, bitter laugh. She looked at him now, her dark eyes flashing with a sudden anger. "Told the great Lucien Moretti, the man who never visited the nursery, the man who looked at his son like he was a broken appliance. You would have fired me. Or worse." Lucien didn't flinch. He deserved that. "I thought he was—" "You thought he was weak," Clara interrupted. "And in your world, weak things get eaten. So you stopped loving him." Lucien looked down at his hands. "I didn't stop loving him. I stopped looking at him. Because every time I looked, I saw my own failure." He paused, the silence stretching. Then he decided to bleed. He decided to tell her the truth that was rotting inside him. "And now, Lucien said, his voice barely a whisper. I look at him, and I see Marco. Clara went still. His father. Marco was my older brother, Lucien said, staring into the fire. He was charming, loud. Everyone loved him. But he was greedy. He sold our shipping routes to the Russians. He let drugs into neighborhoods we promised to keep clean. He was going to destroy the family from the inside. Lucien looked up at Clara. His eyes were dry, but they were haunted. Isabella said he died in a car accident. He didn't. I put a bullet in his heart 3 years ago. I killed my own brother, Clara, to save the family. Clara covered her mouth. She had heard rumors everyone in the staff had, but hearing it from him was different. And now, Lucien gestured to the sleeping boy, I am raising his son, the son he made with my wife while I was out protecting the empire he was selling. He laughed a dark, self-loathing sound. Isabella was right. It's poetic justice. I killed the father, so now I must save the son. Clara set the glass down. She crawled on her knees across the rug until she was right in front of him. She reached out and for the first time touched his hand. Her skin was rough, calloused from work, but warm. You aren't saving him because of guilt, Lucien, she said firmly. Then why? Because when the shooting started, Clara said, squeezing his hand. You didn't ask if he was Marco's. You didn't ask for a paternity test. You put your body between him and a bullet. You are his father. Blood is just biology. Being a father is a choice, and tonight you made your choice. Lucien looked at their joined hands. The vibration of the fire, the crackle of the wood seemed to hum through him. He needs to learn, Lucien said, his voice thickening with emotion. If he survives this, he can't be weak. The Russos won't stop. Isabella won't stop. He needs to be strong. But he can't hear. He doesn't need to hear to be strong, Clara said. He just needs to be understood. You have to learn his language, Lucien. You have to stop trying to fix him and start trying to reach him. Will you teach me? Lucien asked. It was the most vulnerable question he had ever asked in his life. Clara looked at him. Really looked at him. She saw the monster the world feared, and she saw the man beneath it broken and trying to rebuild himself. Yes, she whispered. Suddenly a soft sound came from the couch. Papa! Lucien and Clara both froze. They turned. Leo was awake. His eyes were open clear for the first time in days. He was looking directly at Lucien. Lucien's heart hammered against his ribs. He slid off the coffee table and knelt by the couch, bringing his face level with the boys. I'm here, Leo, Lucien said, articulating slowly, so Leo could read his lips. Leo reached out a trembling hand. He didn't cover his ears. He touched Lucien's face. He traced the stubble on his jaw. He felt the vibration of Lucien's breath. Then Leo did something that broke Lucien Moretti completely. The boy tapped his finger on Lucien's cheek. Tap, 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 tap. The rhythm from the car. Lucien closed his eyes, a single tear escaping and tracking through the soot on his face. He took Leo's small hand and pressed it against his own chest, right over his heart. Thump, 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 thump. I'm here, Lucien choked out. The fever had broken. The poison was gone. But the war was just beginning. 6 months later, the doors to the Moretti boardroom swung open. The air inside the smoky room shifted instantly. 12 of the most dangerous men in New York sat around the long mahogany table. They had been whispering, unsure of the future. The war with the Russos had been bloody swift and decisive. Lucien had burned their organization to the ground, fueled by a rage that terrified even his own soldiers. But the question remained, who was the heir? Lucien walked in first. He looked different. The weary father from the cabin was gone, replaced by a king in a sharp charcoal suit. But he didn't sit at the head of the table immediately. He stood aside. "Gentlemen?" Lucien's voice was calm, commanding. "You asked about the future of this family. You asked about my son." Clara walked in next. She was no longer wearing a maid's apron. She wore a tailored black dress, her head held high, looking every bit the matriarch of the most powerful crime family on the East Coast. And holding her hand was Leo. The boy was 5 years old now. He walked with a confidence that belied his age. He wore a miniature version of his father's suit. He didn't look at the floor. He looked at the men. One of the capos, a heavy-set man named Vinny, scoffed quietly. "The boy is deaf, boss, with all due respect to... How can he lead? He can't hear a lie coming." Lucien smiled. It was a cold, wolfish smile. "He hears more than you ever will, Vinny." Lucien tapped the table. Once. Leo's eyes snapped to Vinny. The boy had learned to read the room not by words, but by the micro-vibrations of human behavior. He watched Vinny's tapping foot. He watched the rapid pulse in Vinny's neck. He watched the way Vinny's hand shook slightly as he reached for his water. Leo looked up at Lucien and signed 2 words. His movements were sharp, precise. Clara translated her voice, steady. "He says the fat man is scared. He has a gun in his boot." The room went deathly silent. Vinny's face turned white. Lucien didn't need to give an order. 2 guards stepped forward, restraining Vinny. They checked his boot. A snub-nosed .38 Special clattered onto the floor. "You were meeting with the remnants of the Russo clan, weren't you, Vinny?" Lucien asked softly. Leo felt your heart beat from across the table. It was the rhythm of a traitor. As the guards dragged the screaming man away, Lucien picked up Leo and sat him on the head of the table. The remaining capos looked at the boy with a new, terrifying respect. He wasn't broken. He was an apex predator who didn't need sound to hunt. Later that evening on the balcony of the penthouse, the city lights glittered below them like a sea of diamonds. "And Isabella?" Clara asked, leaning against the railing. "She is comfortable," Lucien said, lighting a cigar. "I sent her to that facility in Switzerland, the one she liked so much. The doctors there are very thorough. She is heavily sedated. For her own good, of course." It was a dark, poetic justice. The prison she had built for her son was now her home. Lucien put his arm around Clara, pulling her close. Leo was leaning against the glass, feeling the hum of the city, the vibration of the world he would one day rule. Lucien took a silver object from his pocket, the tuning fork. He tapped it lightly on the railing. A pure, clean note rang out, lost to the wind, but felt by the 3 of them. They didn't need words. In the silence they had found everything. And that is the story of Lucien Clara and the silent heir. It's a reminder that sometimes the things we think are weaknesses are actually our greatest strengths. Isabella saw a broken boy. Clara saw a gift. Lucien saw a burden. But he learned to see a son. In a world full of noise, lies, and betrayal, the Moretti family found that the only truth worth fighting for was the one they could feel. Leo Moretti didn't just survive the silence, he mastered it. And he proved that you don't need to hear to be listened to. Wow, what a journey. I have to ask you guys, what would you have done if you were Clara? Would you have risked your life to confront a mafia don, or would you have stayed silent to protect yourself? Let me know in the comments below. I really want to read your take on her choice. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow and lets me know you want more stories like this. And if you haven't already, smash that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new episode. We have a crazy thriller coming up next week about a billionaire who faked his own death, and trust me, you don't want to miss it. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next story. Stay safe.